I remember the precise moment I became a ghost. It wasn't a dramatic scene. There were no slammed doors, no thrown accusations, no tearful confessions of infidelity. It was a Tuesday. We were at a semi-fancy Italian restaurant, a place with checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in wax-encrusted Chianti bottles. Anna's choice, of course. It was always her choice. She was celebrating a promotion, a team lead position she'd earned after 6 months back in the workforce. Her colleagues, a half-dozen bright-eyed, sharp-dressed people in their 30s, surrounded the table. I was there, physically. My body occupied the wicker-seated chair. My hand held a glass of passable Chianti. I even managed to smile at the appropriate moments, a practiced, non-committal lifting of the corners of my mouth that had become my default expression at home. I was the supportive husband, the quiet anchor to Anna's burgeoning star. The conversation was a whirlwind of acronyms I didn't understand, inside jokes about a client named Brenda, and effusive praise for Anna's disruptive mindset. I contributed nothing. No one expected me to. I was part of the scenery, a prop in the narrative of Anna's success. Then Mark, a guy with a carefully sculpted beard and an easy, confident laugh, clinked his fork against his glass. "A toast," he announced, "to Anna, the woman who took a floundering department and turned it into a well-oiled machine. We're all just grateful to be along for the ride." Glasses were raised. To Anna. Mark's eyes then twinkled as they landed on me. "And to what was your name again? Sorry, mate. To Anna's husband, the legendary Mr. Anna."
The table erupted in good-natured laughter, including Anna. Her laugh was a bright, tinkling sound I hadn't heard directed at me in years. She didn't look at me, didn't see the way the air left my lungs as if I'd been punched. She just shook her head, still chuckling, and said, "Oh, stop it, Mark. Leave the poor man alone." Mr. Anna. The name hung in the air, a baptism of erasure. It was a joke, I knew that, a harmless, if cliched bit of office ribbing, but it wasn't the words themselves. It was the perfect, crystalline truth they contained. That's what I was, a derivative, an accessory. My identity had been sanded down, polished, and repurposed as a footnote in her story. I didn't say a word. I just let the smile freeze on my face until it felt like a rictus mask. The conversation flowed on, a river around a stone, and I was that stone, smooth, silent, and utterly insignificant. Later, in the car, the silence was different. It was no longer the comfortable, exhausted quiet of a long-married couple. It was a void. Anna was buzzing, her hands fluttering on the steering wheel as she replayed every compliment, every moment of the evening. "Did you hear what Sarah said about my presentation? The regional VP is going to see it. This is huge, David. Huge." "David," she prompted when I didn't respond. "I heard," I said, my voice flat. "That's great." She glanced at me, a flicker of irritation crossing her features. "What's your problem? You've been in a mood all night." My problem. The problem was that I had spent 16 years building a life with this woman, and in a single offhand joke, I had been neatly summarized and dismissed. The problem was that she couldn't even see it. "No problem," I said, turning to look out the window at the streaking lights of the city. "Just tired." I let the silence reclaim us. It was easier. That night,
Lying in our king-sized bed, the chasm between us felt wider than the physical space. She was inches away, yet she might as well have been on another continent. I could hear the soft, even rhythm of her breathing as she drifted into a satisfied sleep. The day had been a triumph for her. For me, it had been a funeral. And that's when the ghost fully manifested. It wasn't a sudden shock, but a slow, chilling seep of recognition, like cold water filling a basement. I saw it all, not as series of disconnected grievances, but as a pattern, a tapestry of neglect woven over years.
I remember the early days when my ambition to be a graphic designer was romantic and her career in marketing was practical. We were a team, a perfect blend of art and commerce. Then the kids came. Liam first, then 3 years later, Chloe. We made the logical financial decision. Anna would stay home. My design work became a hobby, then a side hustle, and finally it was just David messing around on his computer. To pay the mortgage, I took a stable, soul-crushing job as a production artist at a large printing firm. I became a pixel pusher, a color corrector. My creativity was siphoned off drop by drop to fund our stability. Anna never saw it as a sacrifice. She saw it as my natural trajectory. "You're so steady, David," she'd say, and it sounded like a compliment, but felt like an epitaph. Steady, reliable, sweet. The eye-rolling started around year 7. I'd try to talk about a new technique I'd learned, a design trend I found interesting. Her eyes would glaze over, then perform a slow, deliberate roll toward the ceiling. "That's nice, honey," she'd say, already turning away. My sentences began to feel like burdens. I'd start a story about my day, and she'd cut me off to talk about the plumber, or what the kids needed for school, or a problem with a neighbor. My words were interruptible. Hers were not. The dismissals became more public. At barbecues, she'd tell her friends, "David's happy where he is. He's not very ambitious, but he's a great dad." She'd say it with a pat on my arm, a condescending gesture that felt like being neutered. I was no longer a man with dreams. I was a household appliance, a reliable, uncomplaining appliance. The thank yous for making dinner, for fixing the leaky faucet, for working a double shift, dried up and blew away. The good mornings became grunts. When I'd tentatively broached the subject, my voice tight with the hurt I was ashamed to feel, she'd look at me with genuine befuddlement. "What are you talking about? I'm just stressed with the kids. You're being too sensitive." Too sensitive. The ultimate silencing spell. My feelings were not a valid response to her actions. They were a character flaw in me. So I learned. I sanded down my own edges. I made myself smaller, quieter, less needy. I became a master of non-confrontation. I stopped trying to share my world because it was clear she had no visa for entry. And now, with her return to work, the final tether had been cut. She had a new world, a new language, a new identity. She was Anna, the leader, the innovator, the force. And I was Mr. Anna. Lying in the dark, a cold, hard clarity settled over me. This wasn't sadness anymore. Sadness was a swamp I'd been wading through for a decade. This was something else. This was the solid ground of a decision. I would not fight.
I would not argue, I would not beg for scraps of attention from a woman who had proven time and again that she had none to spare. Fighting would make me the villain, the insecure, unsupportive husband trying to dim her light. Pleading would make me the victim, the pathetic man weeping over a love long dead. No.
If I was a ghost, then I would embrace my phantom nature. I would become silent, untouchable, and utterly self-sufficient. I would quietly, methodically rewrite the story of my life, and I would let her watch from the other side of a glass wall as I built a world where the name Mr. Anna had no meaning. The revenge would not be in destroying her. It would be in letting her finally notice the emptiness she had created, only to find that I was no longer in it. The next morning, I began. Anna was bustling around the kitchen, full of the previous night's energy. She was dressed for power in a tailored navy blue dress. I was in my standard uniform, jeans and a faded t-shirt. The uniform of the unambitious. "I've got that big conference call with the West Coast team at 7. Can you make sure Chloe's science project gets to school? It's the model of the solar system. It's fragile." For years, my response would have been a variation of eager to please. "Of course, no problem, I'll handle it. You go conquer the world." I would have infused my voice with a supportive warmth, hoping to earn a glance, a smile, a crumb of recognition. That morning, I simply said, yes. One word, flat, calm, devoid of emotional subtext, an acknowledgement, not a promise. She paused, her thumb hovering over her screen. She glanced at me, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. My response had been a break in the pattern. The reliable appliance had made an unexpected noise. She opened her mouth, perhaps to ask what was wrong, but her phone buzzed, and the moment was gone. The world of her work reclaimed her. It was a small thing, that monosyllabic reply, but it was the first brick in my new foundation. My plan was not born of malice, but of a desperate, clinical need for survival. It had two parallel tracks. The first was financial, the second, emotional. The financial track was straightforward, if demanding. At work, I became a model of quiet efficiency. I completed my tasks with a swift, detached competence that impressed my supervisor. When an email came around asking for volunteers for weekend overtime to handle a rush corporate job, I was the first to reply. When a colleague groaned about a tedious long-term client needing a complete branding overhaul, I offered to take it off their hands. "You're a lifesaver, David," they'd say. I wasn't. I was a ghost, accumulating capital. I spent my lunch breaks not in the break room, but in a quiet corner of the library, working on my laptop. Years ago, I registered a business name, Lockhart Design Co., using my mother's maiden name. It had been a dormant dream. Now, I revived it with the cold focus of a surgeon. I updated my portfolio website, scoured freelance job boards, and sent out pitches. My years of pixel pushing had given me a ruthless technical proficiency. I could execute clean, professional work faster than most. The first client was a small local brewery. Then a tech startup needed UI assets. Word began to spread. I was reliable, fast, and surprisingly affordable. The money started trickling in, then flowing. I opened a new business checking account. Every freelance dollar went into it. It wasn't hidden. The statements came to the house. But Anna never looked at the mail anymore. She was too busy. I was just handling the boring stuff, as she called it. The emotional track was more subtle, and in many ways more exhausting. It was a discipline of silence and withdrawal. I stopped initiating conversation. If she talked about her work, I would listen with a polite, detached expression, offering the occasional, "I see," or "That's interesting." I was a psychologist taking notes on a patient, not a husband engaging with his wife. The first real test came a few weeks into my new existence. It was a Friday night. We were having a rare family pizza and movie night. Liam, at 13, was mostly buried in his phone, but he was physically present. Chloe, 10, was chattering excitedly about the movie she'd chosen. Anna was distracted, typing on her laptop at the kitchen island. "Just one more email," she'd said for the third time. I served the pizza, I got the drinks, I started the movie. The opening credits were rolling when Anna finally slammed her laptop shut and came to join us on the sofa. She sat next to me, her body a tense line of residual work stress. About 20 minutes into the film, she turned to me. "You're quiet tonight." I kept my eyes on the screen, just watching the movie. "No, I mean, you've been quiet for a while. Is everything okay?"
This was the opening. The old me would have seized it, would have poured out all the accumulated hurt and loneliness, would have tried to communicate. It would have ended with her telling me I was being too sensitive, that I was creating problems where none existed, that she was under a lot of pressure. I turned my head and met her gaze. I gave her a small, calm smile. "Everything's fine, Anna. Just tired." I saw the confusion deepen in her eyes. This wasn't the script. She was prepared for a fight, for a needy husband requiring emotional maintenance. She was not prepared for nothing, for a placid lake with no visible depth. She studied my face for a long moment, searching for a crack in the facade. Finding none, she turned back to the movie, but her posture was different. She was unnerved. The next test was criticism. A week later, I'd made spaghetti for dinner. It was a simple meal, one I'd made 100 times. She took a bite and frowned. "It's a bit bland, don't you think? You forgot the garlic again." The old wound, the one that had been festering for years, throbbed. The instinct to defend myself, to list the things I'd done right, to point out that she hadn't lifted a finger to help, rose in my throat, like bile. I swallowed it. I looked at her, my expression utterly neutral. "I might be right," I said, my voice even. I took a bite of my own food. "It could use more seasoning." Then I continued eating. The silence that fell over the table was profound. Chloe stopped kicking her feet under the chair. Liam looked up from his phone, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure. Anna just stared at me, her fork hovering in midair. My agreement had disarmed her completely. There was no argument to be had, no emotional hook for her to latch onto. My calm acceptance was a weapon she had no defense against. This became my new pattern. Agree, acknowledge, do not engage. "You're spending a lot of time on the computer lately." "I am. There's a lot to do." "You didn't take the trash out." "You're right. I'll get it now." We never talk anymore. A simple, silent nod. The more placid I became, the more she frayed. My silence was a mirror, and she was starting to see her own reflection in it. The dismissive comments became less frequent. The eye-rolling stopped. She started trying to draw me out, her attempts clumsy and infrequent, like someone poking a dormant animal with a stick, wondering if it was still alive. One evening, about 6 months into my quiet revolution, she cornered me in the kitchen. I was loading the dishwasher. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. "You've changed," she said, her voice a mixture of accusation and bewilderment. "You're different. You never talk to me anymore. It's like living with a polite stranger." I closed the dishwasher door and turned to face her. This was the moment, the first real volley. I met her gaze, and for the first time in years, I let her see a sliver of the cold, hard truth in my eyes. Not anger, not hurt, just truth. "You spent years teaching me how," I said, my voice quiet but clear, each word a carefully placed stone. The color drained from her face. She took a small, involuntary step back. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The silence that descended wasn't our usual heavy blanket of neglect. This was different. This was the silence of a verdict being read. It was the first honest moment we'd shared in a decade. She had no reply. There was nothing to say. The evidence was incontrovertible, and I had just entered it into the record. She turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. I stood alone, in the bright, sterile light of the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. I felt no triumph, no joy, only a vast, hollow certainty. The ghost had just spoken, and for the first time, she had been forced to listen. The honesty of that moment in the kitchen didn't heal us. It cauterized the wound, sealing it off, ensuring it would never fester again, but also guaranteeing it would never mend. We entered a new, colder phase, a Cold War fought in a suburban theater.
Anna stopped trying to provoke a reaction. She became watchful, studying me as if I were a complex piece of machinery whose operating manual she had misplaced. She started performing small, tentative acts of wifely duty. She'd make coffee and leave a mug for me on the counter. She'd ask about my day, her tone careful, probing. "How was work?" "Fine," I'd say. "Yours?" And she'd launch into a detailed account, watching me for a flicker of interest, of jealousy, of anything. I would listen, nod, and then find a reason to leave the room. I was a fortress, and her attempts at siege were too little, too late. The drawbridge had been permanently raised. My double life, meanwhile, was thriving. Lockhart Design Co. was no longer a side hustle. It was a legitimate, growing business. The separate account had swelled to a sum that would have shocked her. I'd quietly paid off my car. I'd consulted a lawyer, not to file for divorce, but to understand my rights, to understand the legal topography of the battlefield I knew was coming. I was preparing, not with frantic desperation, but with the methodical precision of a general. The kids noticed the change, of course. Children are seismographs for emotional tremors. "Are you and Mom mad at each other?" Chloe asked me one evening as I helped her with her math homework. I looked at her small, worried face, and my heart ached. This was the collateral damage I had dreaded. But I also knew that living in a house of quiet resentment was its own form of damage. "No, honey, we're not mad," I said. And it was the truth. I was far beyond anger. Mom and I are just going through a busy time. We both love you and Liam very much. That will never change. It was a pat answer, but it seemed to satisfy her. Liam was more perceptive. He'd look at me sometimes, a thoughtful expression on his teenage face, as if he were recalculating who I was. He saw me working late on my laptop, not on company work, but on my own projects. He saw the new, quiet confidence in my posture. One Saturday, I was in the garage, assembling a new, professional-grade drawing tablet I'd bought with my freelance earnings. Liam wandered in. "That's a nice one," he said, leaning against the workbench. "For work?" "For my work," I clarified. He was silent for a moment, watching my hands. "You're different, Dad." "How so?" He shrugged, a masterpiece of adolescent nonchalance. "I don't know. You just are. You seem cooler. The word, coming from my 13-year-old son, was a bolt of lightning to my heart. It wasn't the revenge I had planned, but it was a validation I hadn't known I needed. I was becoming someone my children could look up to, not just someone they took for granted. The final unraveling began 2 months after the kitchen confrontation. Anna came home from work looking pale and strained. She'd had a bad day. A project had gone sideways, and the stress she usually wore as a badge of honor seemed to be crushing her.
She tried to talk to me about it over a silent dinner. I listened, offered a neutral, "That sounds difficult," and returned to my meal. Later, in our bedroom, she finally broke. "I can't do this anymore, David," she said, her voice trembling. She was standing by the window, her back to me. This silence, this distance, it's like living in a tomb." I was sitting on the edge of the bed, taking off my shoes. I didn't look up. "Do what, Anna?" "This," she cried, whirling around. Her face was contorted with a frustration I hadn't seen in years. "This marriage, we're roommates, we're strangers. I feel like I'm going crazy. I think we need to take a break." I had known this was coming. I had planned for it. I had rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times. The key was calm. The key was acceptance. I looked up at her, my expression serene. "Okay." The word hung in the air, simple and devastating. She blinked. "Okay? What do you mean, okay?" "I mean, if you think a break is what you need, then we should do that," I said, my voice as calm as if she'd suggested we try a new brand of coffee.
Her anger evaporated, replaced by a dawning, chilling realization. She had expected a fight. She had expected pleading, promises to change, perhaps even tears. She had pulled the pin on the grenade, and I had caught it, looked at it, and politely placed it in a drawer. You agree?" she stammered. "It seems like the logical next step," I said. "You're unhappy. I want you to be happy." The platitude was a masterstroke. It was what the supportive husband was supposed to say, but stripped of all genuine emotion, it became a devastatingly cold piece of strategy. She was floundering. Where would I go? "Your sister's in the city, isn't she?" I said. "You could stay with her for a while, figure things out." I had already thought it through. I had a plan. She was just now catching up. The following weeks were a whirlwind of quiet, efficient logistics. Anna moved out. There were tears from Chloe, stoic concern from Liam. I comforted them, my calmness a rock in their suddenly shifting world. "It's just for a little while," I told them, "so Mom and I can figure some things out. You'll stay with me here, in your home. Nothing will change for you." I made sure of that. The house was already in the process of being refinanced solely in my name, based on the financial separation I had meticulously built. My credit, bolstered by my secret income, was impeccable. The bills were automated from my accounts. The pantry was stocked. The lawn was mowed. Anna left, assuming she was stepping out for a breath of air, certain that the house of cards I had become would collapse without her. She assumed I would struggle, that I would fail, that the reality of managing a household and a career without her would send me crawling back, penitent and needy. She assumed wrong. The first month she called frequently, her tone a mixture of concern and probing curiosity. "How are you managing?" "Fine." "Is the washing machine acting up?" "It's working perfectly." "Do you need me to talk to the kids?" "We're handling it." My short, uninformative answers were a new form of silence,
She was on the outside now, looking in, and the windows were tinted. The revelation came about 6 weeks after she left. She ran into an old mutual friend, Beth, at a coffee shop. Beth, whose husband was the marketing director for the tech startup that was now my biggest client. "I had no idea you and David were separated," Beth had said, according to the furious phone call I received later that day. "Tom was just raving about him at dinner last night, said Lockhart Design is the best freelancer he's ever worked with, that you're redesigning their entire user interface. He said you've been a lifesaver." The line crackled with Anna's stunned silence as she processed this. A freelancer? A lifesaver? Lockhart Design?
Then, the anger. It came boiling down the phone line, hot and sputtering. "So that's it!" she shouted. "That's what this has all been about! You've been hiding money from me? You've been building some secret business while I was—" "No, Anna," I interrupted, my voice calm, cutting through her fury. "I haven't been hiding anything. You never asked. I just stopped giving you everything I earned." The line went so quiet, I thought she'd hung up. Then I heard a sharp, ragged intake of breath. It wasn't a sob of sadness. It was the sound of someone finally, truly understanding the scale of their miscalculation. She hadn't just lost a husband. She had lost a partner she never knew she had. She had been dismissing a man who was, by all professional accounts, a lifesaver. In that moment, she realized the sweet, unambitious man she thought she'd married was a fiction. And the real one, the one she had ignored into existence, had just outmaneuvered her completely. A year has passed since that phone call. We are separated. The divorce papers, a slow civil negotiation between lawyers. There is no screaming, no fighting over assets. How can there be? I have all the leverage. The house is mine. The financial separation is clean, documented, and indisputable. My business income now dwarfs my old salary. I am not the same man. The kids are with me most weekends. Our house is no longer a museum of quiet resentment. It's a home. There's music. There's laughter. I help Liam with his coding projects. I encourage Chloe's budding artistic talent. I am present for them in a way I never could be when I was using all my energy to navigate the emotional minefield of my marriage.
Anna has an apartment in the city. She got a promotion. She is successful. From the outside, her life looks full, but I see the cracks. I see it in the way she looks at me when she comes to pick up the kids. The confusion is still there, but it has been joined by a new, dawning respect and a profound, unshakable regret. She tries to make conversations sometimes, to bridge the gap. "The kids seem great," she'll say. They are. "I heard you got the Anderson account. Congratulations." "Thank you." The dialogue is polite, sterile. There is no entry point for her. The man she knew, the man she took for granted, is gone. In his place is a confident, self-contained stranger who bears my name and face. Just last week, she came to the door. It was raining, and she was without an umbrella, her hair plastered to her forehead. She looked small, standing on my porch, a place that had once been hers. I handed her the kids' overnight bags. She took them, her fingers brushing mine. She didn't let go immediately. "David, how did we get here?" It was the first truly vulnerable question she had asked me in years. It wasn't an accusation. It was a plea for understanding. I looked at her, at the woman I had loved for 16 years, the woman who had made me a ghost in my own life. I felt a distant echo of the old pain, but it was faint, like a scar that no longer itches. I didn't offer her platitudes. I didn't offer her blame. I gave her the simple, devastating truth. "You stopped seeing me, Anna," I said, my voice calm and even. So eventually, I just disappeared. Her eyes widened. She searched my face, and I knew she was finally seeing me. Not Mr. Anna, not the steady, unambitious husband, but me, David, the architect, the survivor. A single tear traced a path through the rainwater on her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, a gesture of proud humiliation. She nodded, a short, sharp movement, and turned without another word, walking back to her car in the downpour. I closed the door. The house was quiet, warm, and solidly mine. I walked to the living room and looked at the family photos still on the mantel. They were pictures of a different family, a different man, a ghost. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. It's not about shouting your pain from the rooftops. It's about silence. It's about patience. It's about becoming so utterly self-sufficient that the person who made you feel invisible is forced to see the magnificent, fully realized person you've become without them. It's about letting them stand in the emptiness they created and realize, too late, that you've already moved on, built a new world, and closed the door behind you. The silence is no longer a weapon. It is my peace, and it is finally, completely my own.